The friendship between the United States and Canada, two of the world's closest allies, is under serious strain. A decades-old dispute over softwood lumber has erupted once again, but this time, it's become a major economic conflict with far-reaching consequences. This isn't just about wood, it's about jobs, home prices, and the economic stability of both nations. The stakes are higher than ever before. As of September 2025, both countries have taken drastic steps, sending shockwaves through their economies and leaving businesses scrambling to adapt. The US accuses Canada of unfairly subsidizing its lumber industry, claiming it gives Canadian producers an unfair edge. Canada strongly denies these allegations. This round of the dispute is especially fierce, with steep tariff hikes, new retaliatory measures, and a sense of urgency on both sides. For Americans, it means higher prices at the hardware store, delays in home construction, and uncertainty for builders and buyers alike. For Canadians, it threatens thousands of jobs in communities built around forestry, putting entire towns at risk of economic hardship. The US relies on Canadian lumber for about 30% of its supply, an essential resource for building homes and keeping the construction sector moving. Disruptions hit the entire construction industry. While in Canada, lumber is more than just a commodity, it's a national identity and a vital economic pillar. Decisions made now could reshape North American trade for years to come, affecting future generations and the broader global market. The US has imposed heavy tariffs to protect its industry. Canada has hit back, disrupting the lumber flow and escalating tensions. The result: economic pain, political tension, and a volatile market that leaves investors and workers on edge. The path forward is uncertain, with more tariffs looming, both sides digging in, and no easy resolution in sight. As diplomats negotiate behind closed doors, millions of workers and families are caught in the crossfire, anxiously awaiting what comes next. In August 2025, the U.S. Commerce Department made a dramatic move, tripling tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber almost overnight. The decision sent shockwaves through the industry on both sides of the border. Anti-dumping duties soared from 7.66% to 20.56%, stacked on top of a 6.74% countervailing duty. These increases were far higher than most analysts had predicted, and they immediately raised the cost of Canadian lumber entering the U.S. combined. Most Canadian lumber now faces over 27% in tariffs, a level not seen in decades. For many exporters, this was a devastating blow. President Trump's administration framed this as protecting American sawmills from what it called unfair competition, promising to bring jobs back to U.S. communities hit hard by foreign imports. The move was part of a broader America First trade strategy, signaling a tough new approach to international trade disputes. For Canadian mills, the tariffs made their products far more expensive in their biggest market, threatening jobs and putting entire communities at risk. The U.S. Lumber Coalition cheered the decision, calling it vital for domestic producers and a long overdue correction to what they saw as years of unfair trade. But critics warned the real cost would fall on American consumers, making homes even less affordable at a time when prices were already soaring. The construction sector braced for higher costs and uncertainty, with many projects suddenly in jeopardy. The message to Canada was clear: the U.S. was willing to endure some pain to achieve its trade goals, even if it meant risking a major dispute with its closest trading partner. This escalation marked a turning point, signaling a willingness to risk a full-scale economic conflict that could spill over into other industries. The timing couldn't have been worse, with the U.S. housing market already struggling to keep up with demand and affordability at historic lows. The new tariffs set the stage for a tense standoff, with both sides preparing for a prolonged and potentially costly battle. American homebuilders and Canadian producers alike faced a new era of volatility, with uncertainty clouding every business decision. The stakes had never been higher for North American trade, as the ripple effects threatened to impact jobs, prices, and economic growth across the continent. The lumber war was now in full swing, with no end in sight. Canada didn't just retaliate with tariffs, it orchestrated a calculated disruption of the U.S. lumber supply chain, sending shockwaves through the industry. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government took swift, strategic action, causing immediate chaos in the U.S. market and catching American officials off guard. Lumber yards across America saw shipments delayed or canceled, stalling construction projects nationwide and leaving builders scrambling for alternatives. Canada's message was clear: if you make it hard to sell, we'll make it hard to buy. The border became a bottleneck overnight. This wasn't just about price anymore, it was about availability, and suddenly, scarcity became the new reality. The U.S. construction industry now faced shortages, not just higher costs as projects slowed and workers waited for materials that never arrived. Canada's move was risky, hurting its own producers, but it was a bold gamble designed to force the U.S. back to the negotiating table. The disruption exposed how deeply the two economies are linked, and how vulnerable the U.S. supply chain is when even a single partner pulls back. Canadian officials warned that even stronger measures could follow if the U.S. didn't back down, raising the stakes for both sides. The strategy was praised in Canada as a bold stand for national interests, but it also caused hardship for Canadian mills suddenly cut off from their main market. The dispute had shifted from a financial argument to a full-blown logistical crisis, with ripple effects across North America. Both sides now faced mounting pressure from industry leaders, workers, and politicians to resolve the standoff before the damage became irreversible. The stakes were no longer just economic, they were about control over a critical resource that shaped the future of both nations. The supply chain disruption raised the urgency for a solution, as every day of delay meant more losses and growing uncertainty. The lumber war had become a test of economic leverage, political will, and the resilience of cross-border relationships. With each side digging in, the crisis deepened, and the path to resolution grew more complicated. The future of North American construction and the stability of its supply chains now hung in the balance. The impact on American businesses and consumers was immediate. Lumber prices skyrocketed, making new homes even less affordable. Builders faced impossible choices: absorb losses or halt projects. Construction sites across the country went quiet, with workers and suppliers left in limbo. Industry groups warned that tariffs were a direct tax on homebuyers, hurting the economy more than helping. Domestic producers couldn't meet demand, making Canadian imports essential. The dispute turned the American home front into the main battlefield. For families, the cost of a simple renovation now reflected international tensions. In Canada, the pain was just as real. Tariffs and supply disruptions squeezed the forestry sector, threatening mill closures and job losses. Rural communities faced rising unemployment as mills struggled to survive. The government's strategy was a gamble, short-term pain for a hoped-for long-term solution. For workers, the hardship was immediate: reduced hours, layoffs, and mounting anxiety. The lumber industry, a symbol of Canadian strength, now faced an uncertain future. The government was under pressure to protect jobs without crippling the broader economy. The conflict escalated further when President Trump launched a Section 232 investigation, framing Canadian lumber as a national security issue. If the Commerce Department finds a threat, even higher tariffs or strict quotas could follow. The possibility of duties rising to nearly 35% sent shockwaves through both economies. Canadian producers risked being shut out of their biggest market. U.S. builders faced even higher costs. The investigation added a new layer of uncertainty, making long-term planning nearly impossible. The looming threat of more tariffs created a climate of fear on both sides. The dispute had moved beyond economics. Now, national security was at stake. A negotiated settlement seemed further away than ever. Despite the economic warfare, diplomatic efforts continued behind the scenes. High-level talks and technical discussions aimed to de-escalate the conflict, but deep divisions remained. The lumber dispute was now part of a broader pattern of U.S.-Canada trade tensions. New tariffs on other Canadian goods underscored the unpredictable relationship. Legal challenges to the tariffs added another layer of uncertainty, with a key court decision pending. Both nations felt the economic pain and pressure for a resolution mounted. The future remained uncertain. Could diplomats forge a new agreement, or would the conflict escalate further? For millions of workers and businesses, a truce couldn't come soon enough. The search for peace in the lumber war continued. The economic fate of two nations hung in the balance.